All right. Good afternoon, Susan. Producer Susan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Jersey Joe. How are you?
I'm good. We took a week off last week for vacation. Do you remember how to do this?
Yeah, Jersey Joe wasn't in Jersey last week.
No, I wasn't. I was down in the Caribbean. So, first time in 2 years that I've missed doing a show. So, hey, you got your heat turned on yet?
Yeah, so Saturday at the football game, it was 77 degrees and beautiful and sunny. And this morning I woke up and there was snow on the ground.
Snow on the ground. Did you get a lot of trick-or-treaters last night at your place?
I didn't get a lot of trick-or-treaters, and we were talking about this. There's a lot more like trunk or treat events that are happening. And I
People,
think that's
okay.
deterring kids from going door to door these days.
Okay. Oh well, so maybe it's a dying practice. Anyway, hey, we got a ton of stuff to go through because I got stuff from last week I didn't get to that I want to get to. So probably not going to fit it all in, but here's what we're going to try to do. Anyway, today's November 1st, 2023. It's the situation with Jerzee Joe. It's news and perspective you won't hear on TV. And here's our question of the week, which is, when did the practice of daylight savings time start in the U.S. and why? Do you know the answer to that question?
It started during the oil crisis, I believe, in the 70s.
Nope, wrong. Well, we'll
Okay.
get to that. Okay, we'll get to that. Our quote of the week is from the MASH TV series. You ever watch MASH?
Oh yeah, I love it.
All right, Dr. Hawkeye Pierce explaining the difference between war and hell. And given what's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine right now, I think it's a great quote of the week, between war and hell. In our stupidest thing of the week, heard all week, we actually have two contenders. The first is a decision by the Oregon State Board of Education on their new statewide requirements necessary for high school seniors to graduate. And the other is a 90-second clip from a young woman, recent college graduate, telling us how she feels about having to work her first full-time job. And you'll have to decide which of those is the stupidest thing. We'll talk a little bit about the mass shooting in Maine last week. And have you ever heard about something called an OODA loop? OODA, OODA loop?
No.
Well, we're going to talk about an OODA loop because it's something that controls the behaviors of most mass shooters and how disrupting a mass shooter's OODA loop can save lives. In a related comment, we'll ask why news reports frequently tell you about victims of fatal traffic accidents not wearing seatbelts, but ask why they never tell you about murder victims not having a gun with them to defend themselves against being murdered, because I think there's a parallel between the two. You ever heard of a book called The Wealth of Nations by a guy named Adam Smith?
Yeah, I have actually.
Written in 1776.
Yep.
And we'll talk about, he coined the phrase, the invisible hand of capitalism, how the invisible hand of capitalism shapes economics and how businesses do business. And we'll use an example about how people buy ice cream to illustrate that principle of the invisible hand of capitalism. We'll tell you about two recent federal court decisions out of California that might affect the restrictions on the sale and ownership of certain types of guns and ammunition magazine capacities nationwide, even though it was decided about a California case. With winter approaching, we'll tell you what other northern cities are now claiming they have reached their limit on how many homeless people and illegal aliens they can house in the coming frigid months. And our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Delhi, Ohio, where 4 armed men break into a closed smoke shop at 1:30 in the morning, only to be met by an armed store employee who was working in the back room. How do you think that one's going to end?
Probably not going to end well for that guy.
Not going to end well for the bad guys. All right. So back to our question of the week. When did daylight savings time start? Actually, Canada started it in 1908, but the U.S. didn't adopt it till 1918. What was going on in the world in 1918?
There was a war going on.
World War One.
Yeah.
And so the U.S. decided to adopt daylight savings time in World War One to save on fuel, specifically heating fuel, because at the time, a lot of homes were heated with heating oil. Heating oil is essentially the same as diesel fuel, which was used to power our troop ships, battleships, destroyers, tanks, and trucks. So to save on home heating oil, the U.S. decided to adopt what Canada had done 10 years earlier, which was daylight savings time, because you would go to sleep when after the sun went down, or you were awake. So they did it as a fuel saving measure. So 1918, World War I, to save fuel, that's when the U.S. adopted home heating oil. Anyway, so you want to move on to
Well, I do want to say I know that this has gone through Congress, but we need to stop with the clocks changing.
well,
back and
as you know,
forth.
by the way, the majority of the states now want it stopped, and there is a motion, I believe, that passed the House, or maybe it passed the Senate. It's
It
just
only
waiting,
passed one of the two.
right, and it's waiting for the other branch to act. So,
Yeah.
all right,
I think now the big debate, though, is I think the majority of the people agree we need to stop.
right.
I think what people can agree on is, do we stay on permanent daylight savings or do we stay on permanent standard time?
Right. I personally would vote for the permanent daylight savings time. How about you?
I actually go the other way. I vote for permanent standard time.
Right. Well, I could go either way. My preference would be, I'm with you. Let's stop switching the clocks. If I have a choice, it'll be stay on daylight savings time. But hey, I can go with the standard time year round.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my question for you: which do you think is worse, war or hell?
Hell. No. War. Oh, and I know the answer to this question because I've seen this episode.
All right. Well, I'm gonna don't give it away. It's only a 45-second clip. So here's Dr. Hawkeye Pierce, played by Alan Alda, commenting on why war is worse than hell. And here we go. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. And he's in an operating room. He's actually working on doing surgery on a patient. Remember, I remember what the doctor's name, the priest. I'm sorry, the priest.
I know it's Father Mulcahy.
Father
He was
Mulcahy.
having a conversation with Father Mulcahy.
Right, he's having a conversation with Father. So here's the conversation. Here we go.
Ever get the feeling there's a war going on? There's always a war going on. War is the world's favorite spectator sport. Who needs more skin sutures?
Oh, everybody knows war is hell.
Remember, you heard it here last. War isn't hell. War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse.
How do you figure that, Hawkeye?
Easy, Father. Tell me, who goes to hell?
Well, sinners, I believe.
Exactly. There are no innocent bystanders in hell. But war is chock full of them. Little kids, cripples, old ladies. In fact, except for a few of the brass, almost everybody involved is an innocent bystander.
Well, I'm not. I'm here because my country needs me.
I didn't know it wasn't just some excuse to ship you 8,000 miles from home. Yeah, the Korean War was invented so your parents wouldn't come looking for you.
You're a sicko.
So anyway, what do you think? Was Hawkeye right?
Absolutely. Because sinners go to hell and innocent bystanders get killed in war.
So that's our quote of the week, and I think it's very appropriate given what's going on in the world this time of day. At this time in our life. So that's our quote of the week, and I think it's very, very appropriate. All right, you want to move on to the stupidest thing I've heard all week?
What is the stupidest thing you've heard all week?
Well, I've heard two, and you get to pick. No, I don't want you to comment until after. Well, I don't want you to choose until you hear both. All right. So if your child attends public school in the state of Oregon, his or her high school diploma will now be the equivalent of a participation award, since the State Board of Education has now eliminated proficiency in reading, writing, and math as requirements to receive your high school diploma in that state. And here's a quote from the story. High schoolers in Oregon won't need to demonstrate basic competency in reading, writing, or math in order to graduate for at least the next 5 years, because according to education officials, such requirements are unnecessary and disproportionately, wait for it, harm students of color. The essential skills requirement has been on pause since the coronavirus pandemic, and last week, the Oregon State Board of Education voted unanimously to continue suspending the graduation requirement through the 2027-2028 school year. Board members said the standards were unnecessary and harmed marginalized students, since higher rates of students of color, students with disabilities, and students of learning English as a second language ended up having to take the extra step to prove they deserved a diploma. So on a scale of stupid 1 to 10, where would you rank that?
Well, I believe that I sent that to you.
You did.
So
and
it ranks pretty high up there.
All right. So pretty high up there. So here's the second one. This is really, really quick. This is a young gal, maybe 21, 22, just recently graduated from college, working her first full-time job, and she's distraught over having to work a full-time job. And here is, and she's in tears as she's describing to her friends on Twitter how terrible life is. And here we go.
I know I'm probably just being so dramatic and annoying, but this is my first job, like my first 9-to-5 job after college, and I'm in person and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me fucking forever to get there. There's no way I'm gonna be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, fucking duh, if I was able to walk to work and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30 and I don't get home till like 6:15 earliest, and then like I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. Oh my God. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just like the 9-to-5 schedule in general is crazy. Being in the office 9 to 5, like if it was remote, you get off at 5 and you're home and everything's fine. But like, I'm not home. It takes me long to get home, and like people that drive to the office, like you don't get off at 5. And I know it could be worse. I know I could be working longer, but like I literally get off, it's pitch black. Like, I don't have energy. How do you have friends? Like, how do you have time to like meet like a guy? I don't know. Like, how do you have time for like dating? Like, I don't have time for anything, and I'm like so stressed out. And I'm also getting my period, so that's why I'm all emotional. But like, am I so dramatic? It's fine. I know I'm probably just being so dramatic.
So what do you think?
You know, the first one is really sad because that's just bureaucracy at work. But the second one, man, welcome to reality. And maybe she needs to reevaluate her priorities and her values in her life.
Working and having to start your commute to work at 7:30 in the morning and not getting home till 6:15. Oh, life is horrible. I can't tell you how many days
She's got choices, and maybe she needs to make different choices.
So if you had to pick the stupidest thing.
Yeah, I gotta go with the drama girl there, because she just needs to get a different life.
Yeah, you and me both. Welcome to the real world. So
yeah.
Anyway, so that was drama girl. Had you heard that before?
Yeah, I had heard that one before.
Okay. All right. And if any of your listeners want to send me a text and vote onto which one you think is the stupidest one of the week, was it Oregon suspending graduation requirements, basically making your kid's diploma a participation award, or the college girl having to rant about having to work a 9-to-5 job? Feel free to tell us which one you think is the stupidest thing we heard all week. All right, let's talk about some serious stuff. Obviously, everybody's heard about the shooting in Maine, which took primarily place in the Lewiston, Maine bowling alley, which, by the way, turned out was a gun-free zone. They had a big sign on the front door, no guns allowed, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure in Maine, which is kind of a rural area, I'm sure, 30% of the guys at least, had a concealed. But you don't even need a state-issued permit. In Maine, is what they call constitutional carry. What Maine says, hey, if you meet the legal requirements to carry a concealed weapon, you can do so. You don't need a piece of paper from us documenting that you can do so. You're either legally able to do it or you aren't. And if you are, you can. And if you're not legally, you can't. So, very, very common for not only guys, but women too in Maine to have a concealed weapon, because you don't need to apply for a permit. You just take your gun with you when you go out. Anyway, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know this, but 3 different men all died trying to stop the shooter. 2 of them rushed him barehanded, and the third guy had a knife in his hand, and the shooter killed all 3 of them as soon as they got within 20 feet of him. Now, if that scenario sounds familiar, it's because it's almost identical to what happened to 3 unarmed soldiers in Fort Hood in Texas, when they tried to rush this guy, Major Nadal Hassan, who killed 14 soldiers in a gun-free building with his personal pistol. These 3 brave soldiers tried to rush him, and he didn't have an assault rifle, just had a pistol, but he shot all 3 of them, and they all died because they were unarmed. Now, what else do these 2 incidents have in common? Both facilities were gun-free zones, leaving the law-abiding occupants of those buildings defenseless against an armed attacker. And you might say, well, what wasn't Fort Hood an Army base? Yeah, it was an Army base, but the building they were in was a designated gun-free zone building, as was the bowling alley. So, which begs the question, So let's assume that at least a couple of those guys in the building that night didn't normally carry a gun, but had to leave them in the car because it was a gun-free zone. Now assuming that did happen, and it's very plausible, it's more likely than not that it did happen. It begs the question, how different might the outcome have been that night if one or more participants had their concealed weapon with them that night? I think it was about a year ago, we talked about the taxpayer relief shot was a 22-year-old kid in a shopping mall in Indiana. Guy came out with a assault rifle in the food court, and this kid dropped this guy with his concealed pistol from 40 yards away. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, he didn't kill the guy. He hit him like 3 times. But let's just talk about, even if you don't hit the guy, have you heard of something called an OODA loop, OODA?
Okay. Yeah. Now that you say that, I have, because he has this mental image of how the scenario is going to play out.
Right.
And if somebody shoots at him, whether they get hit or not, that scenario, that variable has not played out in his brain.
Right. And the term OODA, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, was actually coined by an Air Force colonel named Colonel Boyd, and he used it to teach fighter pilots about how you engage in aerial combat. And he called it a loop because say you see an enemy fighter, enemy plane, you observe, you then orient yourself, where am I relative to my target? You decide what you're going to do, and then you act. And then throughout that dogfight, you continually go through the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. You do it over and over and over. Most mass shooters absolutely do at least the first OODA loop. They plan, they observe, okay, where do I want to do this shooting? They scout out the location. I mean, he just didn't walk down the street and decide to stop his car. He planned this. He picked the bowling alley. He then oriented himself. Okay, and when I go in this building, where am I going to stand? Where am I going to start shooting? Then he decided to do it. He picked the day and time he was going to do it, and he acted. So he did an initial OODA loop. Now, if somebody in that building had a gun and started shooting back at him, even if they didn't hit him, by the way, really good chance they could have hit him, but even if they didn't have him, Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Well, if you're this shooter and somebody starts shooting at you and you didn't expect somebody to get shooting at you, what's happened? You've broken the guy's OODA loop. All of a sudden, he's disoriented. Where are these shots coming from? Who's shooting at me? What am I going to do? And while he's trying to figure that out, what he's not doing is what?
He's not shooting.
He's not shooting at other people, not shooting at other innocent victims, which gives them time to take shelter, run, leave the building. So in my mind, we look at how many of these mass shootings take place in a gun-free zone. By the way, the Aurora theater shooter in Aurora, Colorado, a couple of years ago, he documented the fact that he picked that particular theater, he drove past 3 other theaters closer to his house to get to that theater because that theater had been designated as a gun-free zone. So, when we look at and by the way, virtually every school shooting, every school is a gun-free zone.
Yep.
So when are people going to realize that gun-free zones are completely counterproductive?
Well, the other thing, and as the days are following this terrible shooting in Maine, additional details are starting to evolve and come out about this man and what happened. And there was a lot of warning signs leading up to this. There was a lot of different, very significant milestones that happened.
Right. And
mentally,
right. Family members even called police and said, you need to do something about our brother or our cousin or whatever.
Yeah. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I will always stand by this. We do not have a gun problem. We have a mental health problem.
Right. Absolutely. We have a mental health problem, and we also have a policy problem. I mean, given all of given all the warning signs, it is beyond me. And Maine does have a red flag, by the way, red flag law, but
which was one of the very significant warning signs that had come out of this. That's come out in the last couple of days about there was a red flag on this guy.
Well, there was, but they didn't proceed with the steps to get his guns forcibly taken away. So it's a tragedy. So you have a mental health problem, followed by a failure to follow policy, followed by a gun-free zone, which set the stage for 18 people getting killed. So, and Anyway, so in summary, given the potential benefits of allowing concealed carry permit holders to bring their concealed weapons with them into business establishments, does the existence of gun-free zones make any sense at all? Does they make any sense at all to you?
Not at all. And I want to challenge anybody out there to find me, gang shootings aside, a mass shooting that has occurred in this country that was not did not have mental undertones.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I can't personally think of a single one, and I know almost all of them. I mean, well, I think there might have been one where the guy was like a religious zealot. He was like a Muslim zealot. So I don't know if you call religious zealotry a mental issue or not. Or was that just terrorism?
I'm not really sure what you classify that as.
Well, every once in a while you get somebody who's a religious zealot, but hey, but they all have mental problems. And by the way, it is not 500 a year. There's this outfit called the Gun Violent Archive that has their own non-standard definition of a mass shooting. And we've talked about this before. And they say, hey, if 4 more people got shot, that's a mass shooting. Well, that includes on a Saturday night in Chicago, 2 opposing groups of gangbangers start shooting at each other, multiple shooters. When the smoke clears, 4 people are wounded with minor gunshot wounds. They got treated at the local ER for their gunshot wounds. Nobody died. They count that as a mass shooting. Do you count that as a mass shooting?
No.
All right, no. The official U.S. government definition of mass shooting is, quote, 4 or more victims killed at random by a single shooter in a public place. And that's what happened in Maine. All right. But, 2 groups of gang. And if we use that official definition, which I think is very close to what most people think of when they hear the phrase, we haven't had 500. We've had 7. And including Maine, we've had 7, less than 1 a month all year. Anyway, so let me go on to my other pet peeve about how the new TV news reports contributing factors. How often have you heard this on a news report after a traffic fatality where somebody's been thrown from the car in an accident and killed? And how often have you heard this news? According to the police, the deceased driver or passenger was not wearing his or her seatbelt. How many times have you heard that?
Yeah, pretty regularly.
Pretty regular.
Those types of accidents.
Right. So they report a contributing factor to the death of the driver or passenger, right?
Yep.
So if they're going to report that contributing factor, why not report this contributing factor? So have you ever heard a news report of a murder where the victim had been, beaten to death, choked to death, stabbed to death, shot to death, where the media reported, and according to police, the victim was not carrying a concealed weapon at the time they were killed by their assailant? Have you ever heard that reported?
Nope.
But isn't it the same thing? It's a contributing factor?
Pretty much, yeah, it's a good parallel.
So, why report the lack of a seatbelt as a contributing factor to a person's death when the cause is a vehicle accident, but not report the lack of the ability to defend themselves when the cause of the death is a random attack by a stranger or even a ex-boyfriend? If you're going to report one, why not report the other? So anyway, that's just my rant on how news selected reports contributing factors. All right, you want to move on to the wealth of nations?
Sure.
Right. And again, Adam Smith, economist, 1776, just about the time, this is 250 years ago, about the same time the Declaration of Independence was being signed. And so the guy was brilliant, and he talked about the invisible hand of capitalists. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, when you look at EV government, we've talked about how the government wants to regulate your water heaters, your furnaces. They want to force you to buy an electric car. They offer incentives. Well, when I say they offer these massive financial incentives. They want to ban, like in California, they're going to ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles. There's special taxes. We've talked about home generators, light bulbs, stoves, water heaters, all the things the government wants to try to force change on. Well, and we talked about even lawnmowers, right? No more gas-powered lawnmowers.
Yeah, leaf blowers and other gardening tools that people use.
Okay. Well, those efforts are aimed at attempting to override the natural selection and production of products guided by the principle known as the invisible hand of capitalism. Again, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. So let me use the selection of ice cream in the freezer section of your local grocery store as a perfect example of the invisible hand of capitalism. And this is how consumers communicate with businesses. You can say, well, I've never communicated with Kraft Foods, or I've never, I've never communicated with Heinz, or General Foods, but you do. First, on a micro level, within any given brand, the amount of each flavor of any particular company, any particular ice cream that a company produces and ships will be affected by consumer demand. If consumers buy twice as much vanilla as chocolate and 4 times as much vanilla as butter pecan, that producer will quickly and continuously adjust their production quantities of those flavors in response to the message it has received from the consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the consumers are sending a message to that manufacturer of ice cream, and they're signaling him, hey, we want more vanilla, half as much chocolate, and only a quarter of much butter pecan. They've sent the message. Now, that's within a given brand. Now, on a macro basis, if consumers are buying 4 times as much of brand A ice cream versus brand B ice cream, then the grocery store will adjust the quantities of ice cream it orders every week from those 2 competing producers, which will send a message to each producer regarding how consumers feel about the price and or quality of the ice cream each company is producing. So if you are company B and your price is the same or even lower than that of company A's ice cream, but company A is still outselling you 4-1, you either have a quality problem, or quality problem, taste problem, or messaging advertising problem.
Yep.
Either way, the consumers are communicating with you, and that is how the invisible hand of capitalism works. What do you think? Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, it is.
Right. So again, you don't need the government to be forcing these things. Consumers have always shaped what producers produce, and government needs to get out of the way and just let. If electric vehicles are great and they're the best solution for consumers will talk with their pocketbooks. You don't need government getting in the way. So that's just an example of the invisible hand of capitalism. If you've never read the book The Wealth of Nations and you're interested, I think you should. All right. Ever heard of a federal court judge named Judge Benitez?
I don't believe I have.
Well, he's a federal court judge, and he happens to sit in California. And some groups in California sued the state of California on two separate cases. One, on California has a gun magazine ban that limits gun magazines to a maximum of 10 rounds. Now, for those not familiar, your typical 9mm pistol comes with a 15 or 16 round magazine. That's not high capacity. That's standard capacity magazine. Well, a couple of years ago, he ruled that was unconstitutional, and it went through the appeals process. And then when the Supreme Court did the Bruin decision, they kicked that because the state appealed his initial ruling saying it was unconstitutional. Well, it got kicked back down to him saying, nope, it needs to be reheard. The state, you can argue one more time why you think your magazine capacity ban should remain intact. But it went right back to Judge Benitez, who's going to listen to the case one more time. And if he rules again that it's unconstitutional, that ruling, which will eliminate these magazine limits, capacity limits, will affect not just California, but every other state like Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and every other state where they have these limits. Now, interestingly enough, there was a separate case on so-called assault weapons. Same thing. 3 years ago, he ruled that their ban on so-called assault weapons were unconstitutional. Went all the way up to the state, appealed it, and he came back, and the same thing it's been turned back to him to review, and the state has one more chance to appeal it. But if he overturns that one, all these states that have, and cities like Boulder, Colorado, that have quote bans on what they call assault weapons will be overturned. So you'll have no more magazine capacity limits and no more assault weapon bans.
I think that the capacity limits are kind of ridiculous because, me being just a, hobbyist, if you will, I can literally change a clip in 2 seconds.
Yep. Yeah.
I think probably a much more experienced person could do it in 1 second. But also I've seen, these fitted, capacity magazines that are not standard, they don't fit the guns very well.
No, they don't. But you're right, by the way. And I think MythBusters even did a series on, and they had a guy, by the way, he he changed that. He changed 3 magazines and shot 30 rounds in under 10 seconds. So yeah, you're right. You can hit the button, eject it, new one in, bang, bang, bang. So they're ridiculous. Plus, particularly if you can drive to another state and buy one, you don't have to go through a background check to buy a magazine. So if you're a bad guy and you intend to kill people, the fact that your state has a ban on high doesn't mean you're not going to drive to the next state over, buy yourself a bunch of high capacity magazines and bring it back to your state. All right. I think we might be running short on time, aren't we?
Yep. You got about 5 minutes.
All right. Well, real quick, Massachusetts is latest state. Boston is latest state to join Chicago, and New York saying, hey, we got no more room. Cold weather's coming. We got people sleeping on the sidewalk. We don't know what to do. A court, by the way, Massachusetts has just like New York State has a right to shelter law. And so here's another state that passed a law saying they are obligated to give shelter, and they're saying we don't have any room. And the court is saying, you passed the law, it's your problem, figure it out. So it's becoming a real crisis. All right. Taxpayer relief shot. Why do we call them taxpayer relief shot? Well, I'll let the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, explain to you why we call them taxpayer relief shots. And here we go. Find this out.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
And again, after you get done with the jury trial, 10 years in jail, you spend $1 million putting a bad guy in jail for 10 years. All right. So here we are in Delhi, Ohio, where 4 thugs, 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning, there's a smoke shop closed for the evening. They don't realize there's a guy working in the back room. And let's hope I can get this to play without the ad. Here we go.
Delhi Township turns deadly when police say an employee pulls out a gun and shoots and kills the suspect.
And Mike Shell has been following this story and joins us live with the very latest. What are you learning, Mike?
Yeah, Amber, the name of the deceased suspect has not been released. It was around 1:40 this morning when police say a group of men broke into the store and was met by an employee who was working in the back. Delhi police say the VIP smoke shop was closed for business when the intruders smashed the glass of the front door.
Multiple people came into the store, broke the front door in, entered the store. They were confronted by an employee.
Dispatchers lost one of the initial 911 callers.
It sounded like there's a disturbance going on. There's a woman screaming.
Unable to reconnect with the woman, a man who identified himself as the store's owner then called in as he was making his way to the shop.
Is there trouble there?
Somebody broke on the store and somebody got shot. As the officers were responding to the scene, they were updated that the shop employee was on scene and that there was an intruder that was shot.
Do you know who shot him?
My worker protected himself. The guy broke in the store.
Police say a silver Kia Rio was spotted at the crime scene, and the chief says that car was stolen and was later found in the Westwood area.
It has been recovered. It was recovered in District 3. And obviously, we're going to process that car. At this point, we're not sure if it's linked or not, but it was in the area when the offense occurred.
Now, I'm told that Delhi police are reviewing security camera footage from inside the store, but they are not ready to release it. I asked the chief about a possible motive, and he said that because tobacco and vape products do have some value on the open market. Reporting live from Delhi, Mike Shell, Fox 19 Now.
So what do you think? Good taxpayer relief shot?
Yeah, it always amazes me sometimes what thieves want to go after, like tobacco products. I mean,
yeah, and vape cartridges, but hey,
I mean, like you said, there is some value there, but that's an awful lot of work for a small small return on your investment.
Well, a carton of cigarettes is like $110 these days. So,
yeah, yes.
So anyway.
But even, I mean, people robbing convenience stores and stuff like not many people use cash. There's not a whole lot of cash in a convenience store.
No, not a lot of cash. But again, cigarettes, it's easier to sell cigarettes.
Yeah.
Sell them on the street corner. Anyway, since we're running out of time, unless you got anything you want to add?
Nope. Can't believe that it's November 1st and there's snow on the ground.
November 1st and snow on the ground is right. I probably have to take my mowing deck off and put the snowblower in the front of my garden tractor next week. Anyway.
Yeah.
Want to thank all of you listening to the podcast for giving up 30 minutes of your day to listen to me ramble on about things I find of interest and importance. I hope you found them as interesting and important as I did. And if so, I hope you continue to listen in the weeks and months to come. If you want to see the story links you heard me talk about, just go to the Jerzee Joe website at jerzeejoe.com. Again, Jerzee spelled J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, Jerzee, jerzeejoe.com. If you want to send me an email, just send it to joe@jerzeejoe.com. And unless you got something to add, producer Susan, I'll see you next week.
All right.
We're all done?
Yep.
Talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.